It was a crisp morning in York, England, at 9:36 a.m. on Friday, May 23, 2025. The ancient city stirred with its usual quiet charm, cobblestone streets glistened from an early drizzle, tourists ambled toward the towering York Minster, and the scent of freshly baked scones drifted from a cafe near Clifford's Tower. Ethan Harrow, a 25-year-old freelance photographer, leaned against a lamppost on the shambles, adjusting the strap of his camera bag. He had taken the day off to capture the medieval beauty of York for a personal portfolio, a much-needed break from the repetitive corporate shoots that paid his rent. The sun peeked through the clouds, casting a soft golden glow on the crooked timber-framed houses lining the narrow street. It felt like an ordinary day, one filled with the promise of art and solitude. Ethan had always been drawn to photography. Ever since he was a teenager growing up in Cornwall, he found solace in framing the world through a lens, freezing moments that others might overlook. It was his escape from the mundane, a way to uncover beauty in the chaos. After moving to York 3 years ago, he'd fallen in love with its history, the Roman walls, the medieval streets, the whispers of ghosts in every shadowed corner. Today, he planned to explore the quieter parts of the city, away from the tourist trails, where ancient alleys and forgotten courtyards held stories of their own. He slung his Nikon D750 over his shoulder and started walking, his worn boots clicking softly against the wet stones. The air grew cooler as he ventured beyond the bustling High Peter Gate, the chatter of the crowds fading into a distant hum. Near a small, overgrown churchyard on Guthramgate, Ethan noticed an old man sitting on a bench, feeding pigeons with trembling hands. The man's eyes followed him, sharp and unblinking, his weathered face etched with lines that spoke of a long, hard life. Ethan raised his camera, framing a shot of the church's ivy-clad gate, its ironwork rusted but ornate. As he adjusted the focus, a strange shiver ran down his spine, the kind that felt like someone had stepped over his grave. He turned, expecting to see the old man staring, but the yard was empty except for a black cat slinking into the shadows, its yellow eyes glinting briefly before it disappeared. Ethan shook his head, chalking it up to the chill in the air, and continued down the street, the click of his shutter punctuating the stillness. As he wandered deeper into the maze of York's backstreets, Ethan stumbled upon a narrow alley he'd never noticed before, despite having walked this area countless times. Its entrance was half obscured by a sagging wooden sign that read, "Dead Man's Lane," in faded, peeling letters. The air here felt heavier, laced with the scent of damp stone and something faintly sour, like rotting leaves after a storm. Intrigued, Ethan stepped inside, his camera at the ready. The alley was flanked by crumbling walls, their plaster peeling to reveal ancient brick beneath, some of it blackened as if by fire. At the far end, he spotted a faded mural painted directly onto the brick, a tall, faceless figure in a dark coat, its limbs unnaturally elongated, reaching toward a group of children who appeared to flee in panic. The paint was weathered, flaking in places, but the image sent a chill through him that had nothing to do with the cool air. He raised his camera and snapped a photo, the flash briefly illuminating the dim space, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. The mural unsettled him, though he couldn't quite say why. The faceless figure seemed to stare back at him, despite its lack of features, its posture both predatory and patient, as if waiting for something, or someone. Ethan lingered for a moment, studying the mural up close. The children in the painting were dressed in old-fashioned clothing, perhaps from the 1700s or 1800s, their faces contorted in terror. One child, a girl with pigtails, clutched a rag doll as she ran, her painted eyes wide with fear. Ethan shivered again, then turned to leave, eager to get back to the sunlight and the safety of the main streets. That night, back in his modest flat in the Micklegate area, Ethan sat at his cluttered desk and uploaded the day's photos to his laptop. His flat was small but cozy, with exposed brick walls, a sagging sofa, and a collection of second-hand books stacked precariously on every surface. A single window overlooked the street below, where the occasional car rumbled past, its headlights casting fleeting beams across the ceiling. Most of the photos were typical, street scenes, the church gate, a close-up of a gargoyle on St. Michael's, but the mural stood out like a dark stain among the brighter images. Zooming in, Ethan noticed something unsettling. In the background, faintly visible behind the faceless figure, was a shape that looked like a person. It wasn't part of the mural, it was too precise, too lifelike. A man, tall and thin, standing with his head tilted, as if observing. Ethan frowned, checking the timestamp, 9:47 a.m. He'd been alone in that alley. Had someone been there, just out of sight? He opened the photo in editing software, adjusting the brightness and contrast to get a better look. The figure in the background became clearer, a man in a long, dark coat, his head smooth and featureless, just like the mural. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He scrolled through the other photos from the alley, but none showed the figure. It was only in that one image, lurking like a ghost caught on film. He closed his laptop, telling himself it was a trick of the light or a smudge on the lens, but sleep didn't come easily that night. Every creak of the old building made him jump, and when he finally drifted off, he dreamed of the alley, dark, endless, with the faceless figure standing just out of reach, its head tilted, watching. The next morning, Ethan woke with a lingering sense of dread. He made a cup of tea, the steam rising in lazy curls as he sat at his desk, staring at the closed laptop. He didn't want to open it, but curiosity gnawed at him. When he finally did, the photo was still there, but the background figure seemed sharper, as if it had moved closer overnight. Its coat was more defined, the fabric almost textured, and its head seemed to tilt a fraction more toward the camera. Ethan's hands trembled as he saved a copy to a USB drive, then deleted the original from his laptop, hoping that would be the end of it. But the unease didn't lift. Determined to shake off the feeling, he returned to Dead Man's Lane that afternoon, armed with his camera and a notebook. The alley looked the same, crumbling walls, the mural, the oppressive air, but the background figure was absent from his new photos. He stood in front of the mural, sketching it in his notebook, trying to understand its origins. The children's terrified expressions seemed even more vivid in the daylight, their painted eyes almost pleading. Ethan noticed a small inscription at the bottom of the mural, barely legible under layers of grime: "Beware the shadow in the mist, for he takes those who seek him." The words sent a jolt through him, but he wrote them down, his hand shaking. On his way back, he stopped at a small bookshop on Stonegate, hoping to find information about the alley. The shopkeeper, an elderly woman named Mrs. Evelyn Carter, looked up from her knitting as he entered. Her glasses sat low on her nose, and her gray hair was pulled into a tight bun. Ethan asked about Dead Man's Lane, showing her his sketch of the mural. Mrs. Carter's expression darkened. "That lane's cursed," she murmured, setting her knitting aside. "Folks say a shadow follows those who linger there. Back in the 1760s, children vanished near that churchyard on Goodramgate. 6 of them, over the span of a year. They were never found, but whispers spread of a tall, faceless man seen in the fog. The mural was painted as a warning, but no one heeds it anymore." Ethan's throat felt dry. "A faceless man?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Carter nodded. "They called him the shadow in the mist. Some say he was a spirit, others a demon. The church held rituals to banish him, but he always returned. If you've seen him," she trailed off, her eyes searching his face. "Be careful, lad. He doesn't let go easily." Ethan thanked her and left, his mind racing. That evening, he sat at a pub called the Golden Fleece, nursing a pint of ale as he scrolled through his phone. The pub was one of York's oldest, its walls adorned with faded paintings and ghost stories. Ethan overheard 2 students at the next table discussing local legends, their voices low but animated. One mentioned the shadow in the mist, describing sightings of a tall, faceless figure in alleys and churchyards, always near places with dark histories. Ethan's pulse quickened. He leaned over, showing them the photo on his phone, the one he'd saved to the USB drive. Their faces paled. "Delete it," one urged, her voice trembling. "It's marked you. Once he knows you've seen him, he doesn't stop." Ethan didn't delete it. Instead, he went home and dug deeper, scouring old forums, digitized archives, and grainy YouTube videos. He found a 1765 parish record that detailed the disappearance of 6 children near Gudramgate, their names listed in faded ink: Mary, Thomas, Eliza, William, Anne, and little James, aged just 4. The record mentioned a tall shadow seen by witnesses, but no arrests were made. Another article, from a 1920s newspaper, described a similar figure spotted during a dense fog, followed by the disappearance of a young boy. The more Ethan uncovered, the more the figure appeared, in his dreams, in reflections, even in the corner of his eye when he turned too quickly. One night, he swore he saw it outside his window, a silhouette against the street lamp, its head tilted, watching. Ethan's life began to unravel. He stopped taking photography jobs, his hands too shaky to hold the camera steady. He barely slept, his nights filled with the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, echoing in his mind. His flat, once a sanctuary, felt like a trap. He started noticing small things: his keys moved from the table to the sofa, his laptop turning on by itself, the air growing colder even with the heater on. One morning, he found a scratch on his bedroom window, long and jagged, as if made by something sharp and inhuman. Desperate for answers, Ethan visited the York Minster Library, a quiet archive tucked beneath the cathedral's soaring arches. The librarian, a wiry man named Mr. Alastair Finch, helped him access old manuscripts. Together, they found a 17th-century journal belonging to a monk named Brother Edmund, who wrote of a faceless entity that haunted the city during times of plague and famine. The monk described it as a harbinger of loss, a spirit that fed on curiosity and fear, luring victims into the fog before taking them. Brother Edmund claimed to have performed a ritual to banish it, using salt and prayer, but warned that it would return if forgotten. Ethan scribbled down the ritual: salt in a circle, a prayer in Latin, a candle to guide lost souls, but he wasn't sure he believed in it. Still, he bought a bag of salt from a corner shop and a candle from a nearby church, determined to try anything. That night, he sat in his flat, the salt circle drawn around him, the candle flickering in the dark. He recited the prayer, his voice shaky, the Latin words clumsy on his tongue. The air grew colder, the candle flame sputtering, but nothing happened. He laughed at himself, feeling foolish, and blew out the candle. The next night, a thick fog rolled into York, blanketing the city in an eerie silence. Ethan couldn't stay in his flat any longer, the walls felt like they were closing in. He grabbed his camera, his torch, and the bag of salt, and headed to Dead Man's Lane, determined to confront whatever was haunting him. The city was quiet, the fog muffling even the sound of his footsteps. The streetlights cast weak halos, barely piercing the mist. As he entered the lane, the mural loomed ahead, its faceless figure seeming to pulse with the fog, its painted arms longer than he remembered. Ethan stood before it, his torch trembling in his hand, when he heard it, a low, rhythmic thud, like footsteps on damp stone. He turned, and there it was, a tall, impossibly thin silhouette, its coat dark against the fog, its head smooth and featureless. No face, just a void where eyes should be. The air grew heavy, pressing against him like a physical weight. Ethan's breath hitched as he raised his camera, snapping a photo, the flash blinding him for a moment. When his vision cleared, the figure was closer, its arms extending, fingers long and claw-like, reaching for him. Panic surged through him. He dropped the torch, the light rolling into a puddle, and ran, the thud growing louder, the fog swirling around him like a living shroud. He burst out of the lane, collapsing near the churchyard on Gudramgate, his chest heaving. The black cat from before sat on a gravestone, watching him with unblinking eyes, as if it knew something he didn't. Ethan scrambled to his feet, clutching his camera, and ran all the way home, locking the door behind him. The next morning, Ethan's flat was silent. His camera sat on the table, its screen dark. The photo was gone, replaced by a single image, a dark coat, a faceless head, and a handwritten note in English: "You saw me. Now I see you." Ethan's hands shook as he packed a bag, leaving York that afternoon for his family home in Cornwall. He left his camera behind, vowing never to touch one again. He told himself it was over, that distance would save him. But in Cornwall, the thud returned. Late at night, he'd wake to see the figure standing at the foot of his bed, its head tilted, watching. The shadow in the mist had followed him, a relentless predator born from curiosity and dread. Ethan stopped sleeping altogether, his days blurring into nights, his mind unraveling. One evening, he found a photo on his phone, one he hadn't taken. It showed his childhood bedroom, the window open, the faceless figure standing just outside, its head tilted toward the camera. Back in York, the mural in Dead Man's Lane remained, its paint a little fresher, the children's faces a little more terrified. Locals began to whisper of a new disappearance, a young photographer, last seen near Goodramgate, his flat left abandoned, a camera on the table. And in the fog-drenched alleys of the city, the shadow waited, patient and eternal, for its next curious soul to wander too close.